Distinguished participants, welcome you all in this Congress. We are now in the 6th session and we'll be talking about the wind power plant's effect on day-ahead markets. Please come in. I'm Zafer Demircan, Head of Department for Energy Affairs. I'd like to introduce you our panelists. On my left, I have Ünal Bey. He's a member of the Consumption and Production Board. He was born in 1959. I'd like to use the time efficiently, so every panelist should maybe introduce themselves. It's easier. Day-ahead markets are among the most significant mechanisms which help us determine the prices. It balances the supply and demand aspects of the entire system. It has a function of financial reciprocation. It sends us the first indications as to possible situations which create a balance within a day. We call it PUMUM, Market Financial Reciprocity Center, or in other words, Market Financial Settlement Center. In electricity market, it's called PUMUM. PUMUM transactions are applied to some wind power plants. They partake in the system. As of this year, we see a growing interest. So our specialists are going to tell this in more detail. In terms of price fluctuations, EMRA has taken necessary steps. Probably the regulation on organization will also be released in near future. This will help a more transparent system take place. Market should be prepared for this. However, wind power plants should develop in a way to give offer to the stock market. We should take steps towards it. We are open to hear more different approaches. Wind investors are encouraged to work on a more facilitated mechanism. Already existing mechanisms should also be modified in a way to allow participation of wind industry in the market. These are the issues we're going to cover today. Let me give the word to one of our panelists. He will introduce himself and he will say a few words about the participation of wind power plants in the day-ahead market. I'd like to welcome you all. I'd also like to greet you. I was born in 1953. I started working for the Ministry of Technology and Industry.
Sanayi ve Teknoloji Bakanlığı'nda çalıştıktan sonra o zamanki adıyla TWEC 1982 Kasım ayında geldi. 1982 Kasım'dan 2007'ye kadar Milli Temsil Merkezi'nde
It's been 5 years now. Before that, I worked at several public authorities in the position of shift manager or operation manager. Now I'm holding the title of head of department for electricity markets operations, and since 2011 we were working on the effects of renewables on day-ahead markets.
2012 ve 2013 dönemlerinde yenilenebilir enerji piyasada nasıl faaliyet göstermiş, bunlarla ilgili özet göstermeye çalışacağız.
Let me give you a summary. These are the general prices in the market. In December 2011, only 15 power plants participated in the market. It had a certain capacity. Then the participation increased. With the increased capacity, but the participation decreased in 2013. Among the main reasons are some advantages offered to wind power plants. They would increase their capacity, they would increase their capability to predict, especially for the upcoming 4 hours within a day, and they'd have the chance to offset their imbalances. We worked on the law to amend it, but however, the law amendments and the regulations have not been released yet. That's why our coverage decreased for 2013. Depending on the power plant type, we have different power plants. On the table you can see the numbers and the percentages of different power plants taking place in the market. I don't have a lot of time, that's why I'm not going to read the figures. We can see the capacities coming from a total renewable energies in Turkey. For example, the total capacity for hydroelectricity is 5,664 megawatts. 5,447 megawatts of this capacity operates outside the system. Only 217 megawatts of this capacity is participating in under the current conditions. Let's have a look at wind. The capacity is 2,664 megawatts. Only let me correct myself, only 73 megawatts is operating within our system. Our topic is day-ahead market and the wind power plants' impact on day-ahead markets. Power plants covered under YECTEM, so the Center for Renewable Energy Resources, are required to announce their day-ahead capacities. The center determines the total capacity, production capacity, and it is included in the system independent of the price. and these prices are evaluated during sales of energy, and they are paid over the prices that we determined beforehand. However, not all the generation doesn't always take place in consideration of the prices determined. The generation is always either higher or lower. They announce lower capacities, but we see in the end of the month an actual production at higher rates. While doing settlement calculations, we focus on the imbalances by trying to find out the difference between the announced generation and the actual generation. And the remaining amount is distributed across the different units of the system. So we reflect the difference on them. This is our practice for YEC'tem. But if we look at how wind power plants operate within the day-ahead markets, they can only announce a schedule of production, as they cannot get rid of their loads. They only function as a system which transmits energy. Therefore, they operate independently from prices. The prices are determined based on priority afterwards. If the value of this generation is 150 TL, Turkish lira, then our marginal price would also be 150 Turkish lira. However, sometimes this price decreases down to 100 lira. Here is a comparison between 2011 and 2012, and also some numbers in 2013. The production of renewable energy has a capacity of 5.5 billion kilowatt hours. The energy produced at this rate equals to a value of 802 million Turkish lira. And this was paid to energy companies. As a result, the average price in 2012 was 144.0 Turkish lira. But let's also have a look at January 2013 and September 2013. The generation was 1.800 billion kilowatt hours, and its value was 349 million Turkish lira. The unit price was 188 Turkish lira. The huge difference stems from the increase in exchange rates and the existence of biomass energy. That's why prices increased. How do we evaluate renewables in day-ahead markets? The amount offered to day-ahead market is the energy production of 3.9 billion kilowatt hours, and the portfolio revenue in exchange of it was 570 million Turkish lira.
In 2013, the energy offered was around 1 billion kilowatt hours, and the revenue in exchange was 196 million Turkish lira. These are the barter-based calculations. The average prices in 2012 and 13 were somehow offset against each other. We again see the difference. The reason for that was a surplus imbalance in the generation, in the production of renewables, and the average price for it was an average of 131 million Turkish lira. If the calculations or the prediction had been correct, the value would be 144 million Turkish lira. But this is a disadvantage caused by imbalance. Here are the differences between 2012 and 13. The barter price was 156, and in 2013 it's 151 million lira. Here is the relation between barter market prices and the prices for renewable production. In 2013, exchange rate, especially exchange rate for dollar, increased, and the biomass production increased. The two main factors led to a gap between barter prices and our energy prices. That was all. Thank you very much. I'm willing to answer your questions. Many thanks to our panelists for having explained how the prices are determined. But the new mechanism center called TWEC looks like contributing quite a lot. Assistant Professor Dr. Mehmet Efe Giresenlioğlu, representing Izmir Economy University. I'm the department head of sustainable energies at Izmir University of Economics. Before that, I acted as a consultant to the Ankara Chamber of Industry. I finished my dissertation in Italy, and I completed my MA in Finland. I have an MA from Bilkent University. Let me talk about what we do at Izmir Economy University. We will have our first graduates this year. All our students have already been employed right now, even before they are a graduate. We don't want to focus on the field from the perspective of an engineer. We'd like to have a broader approach. We believe that energy is an interdisciplinary branch. I'd like to tell you what the market should be like in order to operate, in order to function properly. The title of our panel is The Effects of Wind Power Plants on Day-Ahead Markets. I'd also like to mention the potential effects of them on day-ahead markets. We can predict what can happen in a way. Everyone operating active in this industry would have an idea and would have some estimations about economy, and they would all know that the prices are determined based on the supply and demand balance. There are inelastic and elastic days, but electricity is an inelastic one.
Even though its prices change, the changes in demand are quite slow. We can see it also in terms of gasoline. The demand changes at a minimum rate. Electricity is not substituted just like gasoline. It's an inevitable element of life for modern societies. 1.2 billion people in the world do not have an access to electricity. So once you reach such a comfort, it's impossible for you to give it up. This is a simple graph showing the impacts of any change in demand and supply on the market. Even a small amount of change in supply affects the prices significantly. Let's have a look at the demand and supply curve in electricity market. Electricity is produced with different energy resources. The source is the website of EWE, by the way. Electricity market mostly consists of many resources, including coal, solar power, wind power, and etc. There is a diverse amount of technologies, and each technology has a different way to generate electricity. When you look at academic research, you'd see a term called merit order curve. It doesn't have a Turkish equivalent, so I prefer to use it in English. This is a way to structure the market, but the market is structured based on prices. Prices are dependent on the cost and the technology, of course. The marginal costs of nuclear and wind power are considered low. I was talking about it to my friends a couple of days ago. Wind power is at cross with nuclear power because nuclear is also given a warrant of price together with warrant of purchase, and the question here is how this fixed price can impact the investments in wind, because this warrant of price has a period of 2 to 10 years. Hydropower is not given here because it has various conditions depending on the amount of rains. Wind enters the market at the lowest rank because its cost is low. The spot market price shows a downward trend, but wind changes during the day. So its curve is quite fluctuating during the day due to different variables. When the wind is quite strong and if your wind capacity can significantly affect the markets, the prices go down, and when the power is low, the prices go up. Wind can play a role in creating second markets. There are some secondary markets in Europe, as you know, and there is a lot of investment in wind in that areas in order to avoid overburdening the transmission lines. Wind can be used as a regional solution. There are different types of tariffs in Turkey as well. Peak means when the wind generation is at its highest. This is when you see the highest effect. But if the peak is taking place during night, its effect on the price is smaller. You already mentioned how the market functions in Turkey. We also talked about the fact that wind power operators or producers opt for bilateral contracts. I'd like to share with you two research studies. This is a Denmark example. It was easy to access. I'd also like to show you a study on Australia. These academics prepared a seasonal curve deriving from the data of August 2008 and September 2010. Let's have a look at summer. So I'll tell you which curve means what. Blue line represents less power and higher prices. Red lines represents the high power with smaller prices. The 4 seasons show that wind is less in a period and the prices are higher accordingly. Winters here look like having the highest power of wind. That's why the prices are lower. Participation of wind in the spot market depends on the meteorological estimations determined beforehand. Why do we need to evaluate such data? There are programs and implementations, as Zafer Bey mentioned. The manufacturers in Europe and Australia are benefiting from these kinds of programs. How can we affect the market depending on the capacity? You easily see it here. In the Danish market, with an installed capacity of 1,500 megawatts, even the fluctuations throughout a day lead to a downward trend in the market. What are the economic benefits of wind plants? One problem of Turkey is dependency on foreign resources. That's why renewable energies are supported. The dependency is at a rate of 74%. Wind energy can have a significant role in reducing this dependency. Dependency also comes up with the need to find the proper resource. The volatility is resulted by the changes of natural gas prices, for example. Wind energy can be used as a tool to balance these kinds of price changes. Wind also contributes to a more environmental friendly solution in terms of pollution. One more difference of wind investments from other conventional investments is the fact that the majority of the costs for wind investments comes from the installation costs, whereas the highest cost in conventional energy resources stems from the fuel. I attended the 6th International Energy Conference held in Ankara. I had the chance to look into some studies relating to costs and leveled costs. This study is prepared by German Scientific Institute. Here is the capital cost depending on the resource. These are projections. In Turkey we have a target. It was first to 1,000 megawatts. Now I see that the number is to 23,000 megawatts. More improved technologies will help us reduce the costs of installation. Here is the position of the wind compared to other resources. By 2050, the costs are expected to decrease by 17% and 30% for onshore and offshore installations respectively. Industry has been expecting to get more mature. We also see that the cost reduction in geothermal energies will also be similar to that of wind. The conventional resources are not expected to record such a reduction though. Currently, investment costs will decrease over time for wind. This study is from America. These are the investment costs for energies. If you compare wind against other resources, it has the second lowest investment cost after natural gas investments. This is also an indication we need to take into account. Thanks to the improved technologies in the future, it will really contribute to us. The reason why we always tend to include and exclude hydropower is the maturity, the improvements of technology. These graphs show exactly what I mean, even more clearly. As I said, this study is from America. It shows the costs for various resources, which again show the low-cost prices, low-cost investments for wind. When we talk about our own market, it looks like the prices for wind, the prices for electricity generated with wind can be reduced. In order to reduce the prices of wind, we need investments. In order to attract investments, we need to reduce the cost of investment. So in the upcoming years, it looks like it might be something that we can physically achieve. However, Turkey has signed long-term natural gas agreements. However, these agreements are an obstacle again in front of wind investments or renewable investments. We also need to discuss on this question. For us to prepare a properly functioning market, it should include and it should be analyzed. Such a market should be supported by the state, and the financing instruments should also be accessible. Here are the financial projections again. You can access it on the internet. In 2010, wind was more expensive than other renewables, but by 2030 its costs look like to be reducing compared to natural gas or coal. Here are the projections. The expectation is that the costs of wind will reduce. It's more important to see how the state will opt for wind and how it will support the wind energy. I'm not going to go into many details, but I'd like to emphasize a point. We need to focus on the effects of day-ahead markets on the wind power plants before doing it vice versa, the other way around. Thank you for your consideration. It was a compact presentation. Thank you for your contribution. I'll share with you some positive developments. We have excluded from our current incentive policy the natural gas. As of 16th of June, we won't give new natural gas incentives. It means that our priority will be other resources. However, for each investment in energy, a subsidy of 5th or 6th region is provided, no matter where you invest. And this really receives the burden of taxation on investment costs. Our priority is to reduce the dependency of natural gas, and one of our priorities is to see wind agreements at the same amount of energy, natural gas agreements, long-term natural gas agreements. According to our projections, the installed capacity will double itself by 2023, and the share of natural gas will decrease. However, we are still considering to use natural gas for heating purposes in households. However, the dominance of natural gas within the grid will gradually decrease. Another issue is decreased investment costs for wind. This is the expectation all over the world. Some countries fail to project properly and distribute at high feed-in tariffs. That's why they are having some political problems. It was brought up even in the World Energy Congress. Some countries have recognized this move as a mistake. Decreased costs for technology is something we always favor. Otherwise, we won't be able to avoid unfair competition on the market. We can talk about these in details during question and answer periods. The emission trade can open new windows to the world of renewable energy as well. Now I'm giving the floor to Ünal Terzi. He is also a member of the board in Turkish Wind Energy Association. Dear guests, I'd like to welcome you all. Thank you for attending here. I was born in 1959 in Fatsa. I started my career as an electrical engineer at the electricity distribution department in Ordu.
in the 80s, I don't remember when exactly. I worked there 4 years. Then I was appointed to work in Ankara, and I worked there for 15 years. Then I was assigned as the manager, head of electricity market. Later on, I acted as a founding president of the electricity market. Now I'm retired. We were presented with valuable information about the role of YEKDEM in electricity market. After listening to the speeches of other panelists, I decided to go beyond the borders of my presentation. Of course, I'd share my opinions with you during questions and answers period. YEKDEM's costs are over the day-ahead market's prices. It means that it creates a pressure on the electricity market. I mean, the imbalance, the fluctuations of renewable energies. When does this price start increasing? It increases when the wind of $7.3 is coupled with biomass of $13.3, and now solar is on the way. YEKDEM aims to absorb the imbalance after purchase warrant. It was a support mechanism to this end, and it was really necessary at that moment. It absorbed the imbalance. How does it do it? It reflects this imbalance on electricity suppliers, so distribution and wholesale companies settled or take on YEKDEM's profits and losses over the spot prices. I don't think they make profit of it, do they? The mechanism wasn't something that deserved so much mention in the beginning. However, look at the other examples from around the world. This mechanism depends on the tolerance of those who kind of have to pay this price. It also depends on the insistence of policymakers. It will probably start disturbing people maybe in 5 or 6 years, I'm not sure. The cost of imbalance, which is in the end reflected on the consumer, free consumer, should probably backlash and struck the generator, the producer. You can't evade this. So renewable energies will sooner or later have to take on their own burden. We can't foresee when. What's good about wind is that it's supported by a strong mechanism. It really contributed a lot to a more mature market. 2 years ago, we didn't even have a look at statistics about wind. Today, we are witnessing wind's effects on the spot prices. Now, while we are watching the weather forecasts, we are also trying to find out the state of the wind. They really have a good position. Wind now can affect the price in the spot market. I agree with Mehmet Bey. If we can surpass 7 or 8,000 megawatts, wind farm operators will just not stay as producers of electricity, but they will also act as the players of the electricity market. As long as a wind producer sells to YEKDEM, it only stays as a manufacturer, it doesn't act as a player. Once it starts its own portfolio, it turns into a market player regardless of its power.
Spot market mechanism is a strong instrument. It gives the chance of balancing everything for all the participants of the market. It was first used in Norway 14-15 years ago, and all the developed markets all over the world have adopted day-ahead mechanism. Day-ahead markets buffer you against deviations that you can't foresee. It expects the manufacturers to go through their portfolio one day beforehand and to equip them with some preparation and some balance before the actual day starts. Both technically and in terms of costs, system operators do never opt for imbalances. Such imbalances have to be suffered by all the players. I told you that once a wind manufacturer sells to Yektem, it means that he is only a manufacturer, a producer, not a market player. Therefore, Yektem's comfort that it offers should not make the producers lazy. They will only be passive stakeholders in a market which has a quite high competition level. I hope we achieve 20,000 and even 30,000 megawatts. I believe in this market because I think the capacity that can be used is around 40,000 megawatts. Imagine a wind power plant capacity of 30,000 megawatts by 2030, but you can't even manage your own portfolio, which means that you can't trade electricity. The market offers 4 essential instruments. Electricity market offers that. You should start acting from now on, and you should create a corporate memory for yourself in order to prepare yourself against future, during which the competition is really strong. Otherwise you will never be players and it will just be a waste. An investment amount of 70 or 80 billion dollars will be in the electricity market, but it will be quite inactive, passive. Other market mechanisms are bilateral agreements, according to which a wind producer makes estimations and sells it on a wholesale basis. Your estimations start 13 hours ago beforehand for the next 37 hours. However, it's really a difficult task to estimate your production between the 13th hour and the 37th hour. However, when convenient markets open, the time range will only be 2 hours, so it won't give producers any excuse, and production modules will be able to give a production estimation with an accuracy level of 95%. In the world of bilateral agreements, you aim to sell your electricity. The buyers will take into account a 25% inaccuracy in your estimations, and this inaccuracy is reflected as a 7% risk, which is also reflected on the price they pay you. So you receive a less amount of payment than you would on a spot market. Our predictability of the wind condition really brings with it big risks. 7% is taken away just because you can't manage your portfolio. However, a wind plant with a capacity of 15 to 20,000 megawatts has the capacity of establishing its own client portfolio, consumer portfolio. This is really not difficult because you have estimations for production. The only thing you're expected to do is to associate your profile with that of the client. Other gaps and residues can be sold on the spot or through bilateral agreements. Even on over-the-counter markets, energy is traded on a monthly or weekly basis. So you have the ability to directly associate your profile with the profile of your consumers. To this end, you are recommended to establish a management office. Try to distance yourself away from the comforts Yektam offers. Put in some efforts for 6 months or 2 years, and to create an infrastructure at a level that can benefit from all the instruments of this market. Some producers who really work to that end, and they are quite successful. Some other producers opt for another method, which is being included in the Balance Responsible group. This group makes you even more active than the one provided by Yektam. According to this decision, you are covered under the portfolio of a Balance Responsible group. It can be a supplier which manages all your imbalance. These power plants are generally baseload power plants. Actually, these are the ones which will benefit from in-trade market. Participants with a production portfolio will use the in-trade market more actively. Accordingly, I guess that it will be quite attractive for wind farms to be covered under a Balance Responsible group. Yektam has been designed in a very proper way by EMRA and by the policy making ministry, but the decisions are made based on some projections, including the exchange rates of dollar. When you're covered by a Balance Responsible group, you're charged a 5 to 7% deduction due to the purposes of buffering you against the risks. This is the case with bilateral agreements as well. If you're selling your energy with these agreements, the smarter way is to apply for production estimation modules. I'm sure some of you are already using that, but you're recommended to establish energy offices so that you can manage your own production portfolio. In the end, you will benefit from this as producers, and it will help you be active on the market as players. Thank you. This has been an analytical presentation. Let me mention a couple of points. Don't enter Yektam. Mechanisms like Yektam aim to help investors, acting as a security mechanism while investors apply for financing from banks. Receiving funds becomes much easier with mechanisms like Yektam. But our policies are based on 3 tenets. One is transparency, the second is accessibility, and the third is competitiveness. The capacity of wind power plants does not equal to a huge volume of transaction on electricity market. They are included in the market, but they are not active players of competition. But higher capacities like 20,000 megawatts cannot still be bounded by YEKTEM, cannot still rely on YEKTEM. It would create some complications if we don't facilitate the energy producers' way to the market as active players. The players on the market who do not rely on YEKTEM will reveal the real figure of competition. We shouldn't decrease the amount of supply in a competitive market environment. Our panelists also mentioned the unpredictability of wind. That's why it's not always possible to predict the programs for production for an hour later. But in case we establish the necessary systems, through our modeling capability can be developed with different programs. Balance responsible groups can also facilitate wind producers' position in the market, and they can provide these producers with some competitive power. I'd like to receive your questions first. I'm kindly asking the participants to introduce themselves and to address the panelists.
Soruyu kime sorduğunda, beraberinde kendini tanıttıktan sonra sorusunu ve kime sorduğunda söylerse hızlı vakti daha doğru kullanırız. Buyurun, en arkada bir bayan var.
Ladies first. Çağla Bağceriş from Rüzgar Danışmanlık. I'd like to ask a question, but I'll also share my comments. What I noticed throughout your presentations is that wind power plants contribute more to the day-ahead markets. I managed projects which came up with win and lose situations due to some spot market prices. I had the chance to observe that when they produce a lot, it affects the price significantly. And with a significant portfolio management, they can really be active market players. One handicap with being a market player is that you're responsible from your own imbalances. Even though you can predict the differences between two price mechanisms, most of the time this imbalance works against you. When you predict properly, it will work for your favor, but when there is a little bit imbalance between your predictions and the actual situation, most of the time it is at your loss. Maybe a subsidy study can be carried out, especially relating to the uncertainty of wind or imbalances of wind. It might also be changed with an implementation which allows entrance into the market 2 hours beforehand. I'm wondering when this implementation will be active. Let me first answer you as to when YEK mechanism will enter into force. This system is actually open for testing purposes, and within 15 days in-trade markets will be open for testing purposes again. But nobody cares about tests. We just receive a couple of energy trade offers. We announced it a few times, but we asked for more participation so that we could see our pros and cons and we could improve ourselves more. So we opened it on the 15th of September. We didn't receive any feedback, that's why there will be delays. Unless you want any delays, I'd recommend you to provide us with more offers and with more feedback so that we could see ourselves as well. We also explained in detail how wind power plants operate or carry out activities on the market being under the coverage of YEKTEM. We believe that active market players should be prepared for risks. As you also mentioned, in order to minimize risks, you need to minimize inaccuracies in your predictions. Even natural gas plants cannot eliminate the risks and unpredictabilities 100%. And that's why imbalances are normal in wind market too. And these imbalances would be reflected on other stakeholders, other participants, even though it will backlash in the future. But in general, we reflect these imbalances on the suppliers. This is reflected as an extra cost on consumers as well. What's more important is our targets of 20,000 to 20,000, 25,000 megawatts. We have other targets relating to other renewables as well, and these markets can also not control their frequencies properly. That's why we cannot continue announcing high capacities. We may even fall in such a situation in which we are unable to control our frequencies. We should also have a look at the markets in Europe, especially the one in Germany with a high capacity for wind. We have a lot of time to progress. We need to announce capacities, but for this we also need to increase our consumption levels in order to make sure the system is physically balanced. Technically, just because we are willing to increase wind share, we shouldn't exceed our realistic conditions.
Fiziksel dengesini sağlayabilir. Şunu söylemeye çalışıyorum. Çok fazla geç yapacağız, res yapacağız diye bol keseden atmamak lazım. Teknik olarak diyorum.
Teşekkür ediyoruz size. Evet, yüzü göremiyorum ama kırmızı. Evet, buyurun.
Benim bir sorum olacak Nezih Bey'e.
Nezih Bey?
Evet.
Nezih Bey'in reytingi yüksek.
Zeki Bey's rating is on increase. I'm electrical engineer. We have a power plant of 5 megawatts. We are also considering a biomass plant of 3 megawatts. I'm wondering how you calculate the prices. Is it going to be 0.3 multiplied by 13.3 based on the figures, direct figures on the counter? Is it something that is long term, or is it going to be renewed every year? That's renewed every year, but I don't mean the prices. Prices are determined by law. Prices are fixed. Participants every year before 31st of October are required to announce if they are going to enter YEKTEM, and they are required to ask for a request from EMRA. We don't change the prices, but lists are changed every year. But I have a right after my system is activated. You can stay in YEK for 10 years by always providing your offers. But if you forget to give your offer, if you're not listed, you should excuse us. This is what Emra says.
Evet, buyurun.
Merhabalar, Borsa Enerji Kısmı Buray Altay'da. Benim sorum yine
According to the draft, the coefficient will be 0.1. Will the latest improvements, developments be subjected to this? This has a huge impact on wind farms, because for wind farms this might mean additional imbalances. Before answering this question, it would be a better idea to explain how the coefficient functions within the system. The first aim is to minimize the imbalances. The imbalances do not lead to costs on EMRA or on the market, but in order for the system to function properly, imbalances should be minimized. Imbalances are experienced either due to some manipulators or incorrect estimations. Day-ahead markets aim to create a balance before the day starts. And when you deliver an imbalance of 15% to the system operator, the price gap gets bigger. That's why people always ask if there are manipulators. Every party asks this question. A few days ago I was at home and somebody called me. Apparently huge imbalances were belonging to 2011 were removed in 2012. And the question was what we did before 2011. For 2011, the main component of the system was imbalance. The main aim of the current market is to treat everyone fairly. The idea is to distribute the imbalances across the players. In England, the cost of imbalance is 10 times of the normal price. This is a punitive mechanism, only for the purposes of balancing the system. We have come up with these coefficients in order to punish the imbalances. This was our evaluation in collaboration with EMRA. We have argued and decided to start implementation after 2015, and we shared our opinion with EMRA accordingly. If the regulatory authority decides that it would be more proper to start the implementation in 2014, we won't have any other option. But our opinion is to start implementing this coefficients in 2015.
Onun ötesinde de tabii kurul bunu değerlendirecek. Kurul derse ki 2015'e gerek yok, 2014'te uygulayalım. O bizim dışımızda. Ama bizim önerimiz 2015'e bu KDV katsayılarının eklenmesi. Ama daha fazla değil. Evet.
Even in case of a physically balanced system, people are expected to go hand in hand with the programs they announce. What's more important than if there is an imbalance in the system is some people who protect their imbalance position while offering for the market and trying to receive an unfair portion. For us to ensure fair treatment on the market, we should deal with imbalances. The idea was not applying punitive measures against people. Here we are trying to protect the market players by evening out their positions against each other. This is the case with all the energy resources. We can have the last question.
Arkadan bir arkadaşımız var mıydı? Vazgeçti.
It's not necessarily about imbalance. I'd just like to ask another question. What kind of a policy will you follow for hydroelectric power plants? Okay, wind farms can make estimations 2 hours beforehand, and they can act in a way to manage their imbalances. What about the producers who operate with, who generate electricity with resources that do not belong to them? I'm wondering how they'll be able to deal with punitive measures against them. Thank you for asking this question. We've been working on this problem for a year with the General Directorate for State Hydraulic Works, especially relating to the systems, cascade systems. We even started developing an artificial space model. TWEC is supporting us in that. Systems working with a cascade connection. I mean, in such a system, especially when the price has a clear map, somebody will increase the price in the market. Or all the cascades will be connected and you will give a single offer. This might ease the burden a little bit, but the current market structure has failed to take into consideration the cascade system in a way. In some periods these systems work independently from the prices in the market. In such situations, reflecting the costs on the producers might really create a problem, don't you think so? I might recommend that, especially after all the privatization works are completed, the transmission company can offer such a reflection, punitive reflection. Now there is a mechanism which acts independently from the price. Even though you complete the privatization efforts, this problem can't be solved. When you look at the systems which solved these problems, you see that these systems have developed a mutual structure. For example, in Norway, there is such a system. That's why the General Directorate for State Hydraulic Works is also working to that end to create a more different structure and to gather these systems in a more proper environment. I know that they will develop a model which takes into account these kinds of external factors which are not created by human. Currently we are working to this end in collaboration with the General Directorate of Hydraulic Works. In terms of carrying this on the electricity market, we will need another structure. there are some regulators working on these kinds of issues. For example, wind farms entered the TWEC mechanism. The distance here matters as well, and when the production takes place in compliance with these regulations, the payment will be made accordingly. I agree that we need to develop a mechanism.
Mesafe de burada önemli. Ama üretimini yapar ve birebir yedin alışların parasını alır. Ne kadar 10 yıl
In order to gather these kinds of power plants on a mutual environment, we can also mutually manage the situation.
maliyet hesaplarında onları birebir dikkate alır ve bir dengeden sorumlu grup vari bir mekanizmayla beraber yönetmek diye düşünüyorum.
Thank you very much for your questions and feedback. We are ending this session. Before ending this session, I would like to grant the certificates to our panelists.